I get this question, from people in the community. Like, I'm invited in by clients, to do some work, and oftentimes, like, the client is not always somebody. It's usually someone who's white, dominant, often pale, male, stale, that those different. And so when I'm in this space and I'm working, and of course I'm working with diverse populations, and I have that question a lot. Or, what do I do? These are my issues, and typically I just say there's it's three things, right? You either accept the culture for what it is and find ways to, because I want to also say, like, it's a privilege to be able to take what I call the third option, which is to leave, right? Because sometimes it's like, there were times in my life where I had to keep the job because I have bills to pay. And, so I really want to be mindful when I answer a question like this, that you have to look at your context. It's very, it's a unique situation, but you can, typically that you either try to change it, right? And so if you take the path of trying to change it, that's about looking for allies in the system, right? Looking for people who have power, privilege, and platform, and can be, influential in terms of trying to create some change. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. The second thing, as I said, is to try and accept it. It depends on where you are in your journey. Like, I'm very conscious of how much fatigue people are having right now around Zoom fatigue, COVID fatigue, inaction fatigue around all the injustice that we're seeing. So there's a lot on the go if we're talking about this moment. And so sometimes it's about, I just need to take care of myself and try to just, keep myself strong, because leaving isn't an option. And of course, the last one is kind of making that call that, the work that it's going to involve for me to feel completely included here is not, not worth it. Like, the culture change gap is so great that, you make that call for self-care, and there's so many statistics that have come out in this last year. And I've been happy to see the amount of research that's happening, because I feel like this was an invisible problem on some level. I mean, the lawyers of systems know about it because you sign NDAs, so it never becomes public, but like, the system knows what they're spending on this problem, right? And people anecdotally, like, there isn't a racialized person that I know who hasn't had some sort of experience. Now, whether they've ever brought that up at work or not, that's another situation. But for me, I have always spoken up. At cost to myself personally, I've stood up. And so it's not an easy thing to do, but there's that moment where you're like, I need to challenge. I'm not going to let this happen, because if I don't stand up, how many people behind me are coming next, and they're going to experience the same thing? And so that's something that we have to ask ourselves, that, if you have the strength, the support, the resources, but it's always worthwhile to do that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with you, because anybody who is working anywhere, is doing a job, is doing it because they need to pay the bills. And so there are situations where you have no option but to just deal with it, deal with the wall in your face, deal with all the no's, because I have been speaking to people on this issue ever since we decided to do this show, to get a better understanding what the real picture of diversity and inclusion is in Halton region. And the most common feedback I hear is that, like you said, don't shine too much. There's this hush hush culture within organizations, and I'm talking about all kinds of private, public organizations, where you are expected to fit into this role that is just so precisely cut. So yes, so my question was that, do you have anything to add, Mifrah? Because what I have heard from folks is that in Halton specifically, because we are on YourTV Halton, I just was listening to folks who said that, they feel like there's a hush hush culture where you have to fit this role that has been just carved, centimeter by millimeter to the specification where you have to fit in. And there's no room for, any rough edges, so to speak.
Well, I would say that even if you don't want to fit in, you are kind of pushed into those holes, those cubby holes. Yeah. And sometimes when you say, you know what, I don't really care, this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to be, irrespective. And then they will have these awkward questions to kind of gaslight you into thinking, oh, I really want to be that person, like seriously, that kind of questions. And I've got some really, really weird questions, which are totally unrelated to, the kind of conversation or work that we're discussing, but it's just basically, oh, because you're Muslim, can you comment on this? It's like, why do I need to comment on that? on some political issue that is like in the Middle East. Like I don't speak for those people. Would I ask you to speak on, a protest in Ireland, for example? Like, how are you qualified to speak on that? So, and why should I expect you to speak on that on the behalf of someone that's, something that's happening halfway across the globe? So it's basically a tactic. Basically, I would think, as you said, microaggressions. Like, oh, no, we don't like the face that you're putting up. We need to do something about that. Yeah. So I think we just have to roll with the punches sometimes, and or sometimes just call out to people like, excuse me, can you explain why you're asking this of me? Make the person uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I've been in situations myself where I really had to turn around and say, may I know why you're asking me this? Because I've had situations where people have made comments about my children and their skin color, and it has made me very offended, not only as a woman of color, but also as a mother. So I understand what you're saying, but it is a learning process, and I know that we are in that age. I'm not going to call it the golden age, but in that age or phase where I feel like we are able to talk about the topic of inclusion and diversity more casually, more prevalently, and more, especially in Halton, because just the way we are growing, I think it is a writing on the wall that, there are more people here who are not the same. They're different, like myself and like you ladies here as well. And so it's interesting to start a discussion where we get to know each other. We talk about issues that matter to us, things that are okay, things that are concerning, and the gaps that need to be filled in understanding. And in my own experience, I have come across this idea of the old Halton and the new Halton, and those who are listening and watching will completely understand. And I can't see you, but I know there are lots of nodding heads. I can tell you that there is this communication gap more than anything else. As a counselor, I get to meet a lot of people from the old Halton, from the new Halton. I'm part of New Halton myself. And I can let you guys know that there's good intention on both sides. There's good direction on both sides. It's just a matter of, who is going to reach out first. And so this is my kind of, endeavor to reach out first, to introduce myself, and to give the opportunity to all of Halton to ask us the questions they've been wanting to ask for a long time, but didn't know who to reach out to. Here we are. We're available to take your questions, any comments you have on issues related to diversity and inclusion.